Trump administration said to be preparing trade sanctions against China. Will be asking whether a trade war between China and the U.S. is in the offing. And as the Chinese conglomerate gets into financial hot water, we'll be looking at the links between diversity and risk. Welcome to The Point. I'm Li Chuan, sitting in for Liu Xi. Our top story, according to informed sources, the Trump administration is preparing trade sanctions against China as soon as this week. Although denied by the U.S. administration, the move follows Donald Trump's disappointment with China on Twitter, accusing China of doing nothing about the DPRK situation, except for just talking. Well, it is said that the Trump administration will soon open an investigation into China's alleged violations of U.S. intellectual property rights and forced technology transfers. Following the investigation, the U.S. could impose unilateral sanctions duties against Chinese products in response to what it describes as Beijing's burdensome for unfair restrictions on American commerce. Well, is such a move fair or even reasonable? And as tensions escalate again between world's largest and second economies, could a trade war be in the offing? Now, joining me from Washington, D.C. is Dr. Ivan Eland, a senior fellow at the Independent Institute. And here with me in the Beijing studio is Dr. Zhao Tong, a research fellow at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Thank you for joining us, to you both. So let me start with Dr. Eland first. The U.S. is said to be considering using rarely invoked U.S. trade laws to fend off alleged China's demands that foreign companies share their technology in return for access to the country's vast market. The move has been prompted by discontent among U.S. businesses, which have grown frustrated with China's trade and market access practices. The Wall Street Journal reported this. Are U.S. moves fair and reasonable?
Well, I think China does have some restrictions there, but I don't think that's really what's driving this process. I think Trump is trying to put the hammer over Chinese trade with the U.S. to get the Chinese to do something about the North Korean nuclear program. I think that's the heart of it, and I think he's trying to leverage those. He complained during the campaign about Chinese practices, trade practices, some of which were legitimate, some of which weren't. But I think that in this case, he's trying to make a deal, either China, rein in North Korea, your ally, and help us to get rid of its nuclear and missile programs, or we crack down on China trade in the U.S.
Now, Dr. Zhao, let me bring you into the discussion. The U.S. policy shift may also reflect White House frustration that it hasn't received the help it hoped for from China in addressing this DPRK nuclear ambition. Is this why Trump administration considering trade sanctions against China? What do you think?
Well, I think the U.S. is indeed very frustrated. Recently, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, has expressly vented her frustration at China. But I don't think this frustration is fair. China indeed has an economic relationship with North Korea, but that doesn't necessarily translate into Chinese leverage over North Korea's nuclear policy. Just consider the situation between United States and Israel. U.S. has a close relationship with Israel, but U.S. has no capability to persuade Israel to give up its nuclear weapons. And also on economic side, China has done a lot to contain North Korea. China has stopped importing coal from North Korea, which is a major source of North Korean income. China has recently stopped providing North Korea with diesel and gas, which is very important for the functioning of North Korean society and industry. And also as a result of Chinese sanctions against North Korea, China is under increasing North Korean threat. There is this statement from a reported North Korean official that their missiles can fly in any direction, which is a very thinly veiled threat to China. So China is really taking price for sanctioning North Korea, which has now been sufficiently appreciated by the United States and international community.
And speaking about the missile tests and the threat posing by the DPRK, let me also get your thoughts on this, Dr. Zhao. In the wake of DPRK's test last Friday of this ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, capable reaching the continental United States, that's been claimed by the DPRK side. Donald Trump has blamed China for doing nothing for the U.S. with the DPRK. But China says the crux and the focal point of contention of the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue do not lie with the Chinese side. Settling the Peninsula nuclear issue calls for collective wisdom and concerted efforts. What's your take on this?
I think, yes, China has made great efforts to put economic pressure on North Korea. China has also put a lot of diplomatic and political pressure on North Korea. I think regarding North Korea, we have to look at the fundamental cause, the fundamental motivation of North Korea's nuclear program. Apparently, North Korea is a very paranoid country. The reason it pursued nuclear weapons is because it sincerely feels threatened. And as a result, by further threatening North Korea with more military deployment, with additional economic sanctions, by making North Korea feeling even less secure and less safe, we are only convincing North Korea to hold tighter to its nuclear weapons. So in order to really address North Korea's threat perception, I think the only viable option going forward is to have a direct negotiation with North Korea. North Korea has recently said that it's willing to suspend its nuclear missile test. I think U.S. should be more flexible in considering that option.
And Dr. Eland, it is also worth noting that Trump is now facing many challenges at home, specifically the investigations against his family members for their alleged role in colluding with Russia, as well as the dramatic fall in his approval rating. So could this action against China be seen as a way of diverting public attention from his personal problems?
Well, it may be, and it also may be a way to shore up his support among his base support, which is about 36% of the U.S. electorate. And the way he would do that is, in the campaign, he railed against China as taking American jobs, currency manipulation, which was sort of a false charge, and other charges against China. And if he continues to bash China and to actually take action against them, it does shore up his base. And he needs his base because that's all he's got left. He is embattled. And I think it's less of a distraction. Probably it is a distraction. But the main reason, I think, is to shore up his domestic base, who thinks their economic problems should be blamed on foreigners. And China is one of the most obvious targets for that, because we have such a rich trade relationship. U.S.-China relationship is very broad and deep, and it's a major target for his base, who are people who have been down on their luck without a job, or less of a job than they think they should have.
And Dr. Jha, let's speak about this U.S. sanctions against the DPRK. Following the North 2 missile test in July, Trump told reporters on Monday that his administration would be able to handle the DPRK, but how? Last month the U.S. renewed sanctions against the DPRK, but considering there are not much contacts, well, zero contacts in any form between these two countries, how effective could these sanctions be in denuclearizing the DPRK?
Indeed, when Trump was presiding over his cabinet meeting, when the reporters were present, he said he can handle North Korea, and he said the word handle 4 times without going into any specifics about how he's going to handle North Korea, which reflects the fact that the American president really has no good option to deal with North Korea. There is no real viable military option. The risk is simply too high. The U.S. is unwilling to engage with North Korea. Therefore, it looks like to him that putting more pressure on China to outsource the problem to China is the only available option. But we have to recognize that pursuing the seemingly only available option is not necessarily the best strategy. At the end of the day, North Korea has more or less already obtained an ICBM capability to directly threaten the United States. The only way to diffuse the tension, I think, is really to pursue some near-term objectives, such as quickly freeze and cap North Korea's nuclear missile program. I think the U.S. has to consider the second best option, which is to talk with North Korea to have a near-term agreement that can prevent North Korea from further advancing its nuclear and missile capabilities.
And Dr. Zhao, has said that the U.S. joint military drills with the ROK, as well as the testing of the THAAD system in the south, are only pushing the DPRK further along the road of testing its ballistic missiles and nuclear program. I mean, these drills being carried out are specifically targeting the DPRK, viewing them as the hypothetical enemy. So is the U.S. really helping to ease tensions in the Korean Peninsula, given the current situation? Is a peaceful consensus even possible still?
Again, more military pressure, more exercises will only be counterproductive, given that they only serve the purpose of increasing North Korea's threat perception. And doing that certainly won't convince North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons. At this moment, I still believe that the North Korean are interested in solving the crisis. North Korea is apparently willing to consider a long-term solution of reaching a peace treaty with the United States. The only difficulty is, at this moment, given the deep mistrust between North Korea and the United States, it's very unlikely that North Korea would agree to give up its nuclear weapons at this moment. There has to be a process of building confidence, building trust, and we have to start with small steps. And therefore, the only viable approach dealing with North Korea is really to take a incremental process, hopefully starting with a near-term deal to freeze their missile and nuclear program.
Dr. Yelam, what are your thoughts on the possibility of U.S. employing military options?
Well, I don't think there's too many good military options, because what will happen is you'll have a all-out war, or you could have an all-out war on the Korean Peninsula, and of course the North Koreans could really punish Seoul and others with their missiles and artillery, of which they have a lot. Now, of course, the U.S. would probably win that war, eventually, but of course there's going to be a lot of damage, and if the main purpose is to defend South Korea, we would defend South Korea while destroying it at the same time. So the military options are not very good. And I also think with the new solid fuel missile technology that North Korea has, it's hard to do surgical attacks on just missiles and that sort of thing. And even if you do, North Korea could retaliate by launching surgical attacks on Seoul, which is a city of, it wouldn't be so surgical at all. So I think, and I think we've gotten the United States, the other panelist is right. I think that the United States has some role in this, and that is we shouldn't continue to threaten North Korea. The reason that they're so paranoid, or at least one of the reasons, is because they've seen us invade Iraq, a country that had no nuclear weapons. Libya had given up its nuclear weapons in exchange for aid and that sort of thing. And then we decapitated that regime and threw out Gaddafi after he was playing ball with us. So they read the lesson from the first Gulf War. If you want to keep the U.S. out, get nuclear weapons, and they've done that. And I think there should be a two-pronged approach to the United States. One is to try to negotiate with the North to cap its nuclear and missile programs. The other is to just use old-fashioned deterrence. The United States has many more warheads than the North Koreans, and can incinerate North Korea, and that should be enough to keep the regime. The regime isn't suicidal. It's quirky, it's paranoid, but it's not suicidal. And I think deterrence and maybe a little missile defense, which doesn't work that well yet, and maybe some cyber capabilities is about all the U.S. can do at this point. I think the military option, there's no good military options at this point.
The regime is not suicidal. The United States military also says it has detected highly unusual and unprecedented levels of submarine activity by the DPRK recently. Dr. Yelan, does that imply that there could be another nuclear test soon?
Well, it could be. I mean, North Korea seems to be going full throttle to get both nuclear weapons and a capability that will take that nuclear weapon to the United States on an ICBM. So it wouldn't surprise me. And they don't seem to pay any attention to China when China tries to say, hey, why don't you not do that nuclear test or that missile test? So I think China does have some ways to pressure North Korea. It's got 90% of North Korean trade, which is sort of a unique situation, including financial stuff, energy, etc. But I think one of the reasons that China doesn't want to do that is because they don't want the North Korean regime to implode and have refugee flows. And also, if you had a unified Korea, as we had it with the unified Germany, with the South Korean regime in charge, of course, you're going to have U.S. Troops and intelligence facilities right on the border with China. And I think China would like to avoid that. So China's interest may not be, I'm sure that China is trying to contain North Korea because it's actually a danger to the Chinese, as the other panelists pointed out. But I think China also has some contravening interests in not wanting to make the regime implode by severe economic pressure.
All right. We're running out of time. I have to leave it there. Thank you very much from Washington, D.C., Dr. Ivan Eland from the Independent Institute, and also in the Beijing studio, Dr. Zhao Tongwei, Research Fellow at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Many thanks to you both. Let's now take a short break on The Point. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Point. A court in Beijing has ordered yet another freeze on the assets of struggling tech company LeEco, which is well known in China as an ambitious company that pledged to challenge American giants like Apple and Tesla. In 2004, Jia Yueting founded a video website and expanded it into an integrated ecosystem, which includes media content, smartphones, TVs, electric bicycles, and cars, as well as movies. And that expansion, however, relied heavily on debt to fund its ever-expanding list of projects. The company's changing fortunes bring to the fore the question of whether a company should concentrate on one main business line or build up diversity to expand its spheres of interest. What are the top risks for businesses to expand? What is the current venture capital situation in China? I'm now joined by Mr. Chen Hong. He's the CEO and chairman of the Haina Group, and also Mr. David Liang, Chief Business Officer of Duke Kunshan University. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. So let me start with you, Mr. Chen, first. How do you explain the poor performance of LeEco's so-called ecosystem? Did it diversify too much or too quickly, or was the original model flawed?
I think when a company, specifically an entrepreneur started the company, is trying to build it up. When it is not the dominating force in the world, it needs focus. And I think one thing which the ecosystem did was at a very young age, you're not strong enough. You're starting expanding into multiple areas where each of them you're not strong enough, you're bleeding. So adding together, creating a big financial crisis for the group. So it would be very, very difficult to challenge. So we always tell entrepreneur, when you start a company, focus 120% on one thing and one thing only. The focus, focus, and focus. I think there are few, of course, conglomerates globally. It is GE. Even Jack Welch said that when your division is not the top 3 in the world, we're going to spin you off or sell off, right? So I think that's something where I'm really seeing a lot in China and worldwide, is that a lot of young companies starting doing too many things and they draw them too thin. And at the end of the day, some company with great focus and great execution, end of the day, become the leader. So that's advice to the entrepreneurs.
Your thoughts on this, David? I mean, this is the company once had quite an ambitious plan at the beginning, and this company was once a high-flying tech empire at the time before this heavy blow. What went wrong there?
Well, if you look at the wording about ecosystem, right? It was first coined by I think James Moore back in the 1990s, and he was really talking about a group of distributors and suppliers that would be providing, mutually supportive type of environment to each other, and that I think. TV, for example, actually has found its place in terms of making that happen. It was able to establish a platform, bring together a lot of properties, programs. If you open up the TV webpage right now, or the application that you look at, you can see there's music, there's a little bit of advertising, and there's different kinds of programming, sports, comedy shows, and so forth. So I think certainly Le TV itself has found an ecosystem that is very appropriate. But once you expand beyond the area that you really have strengths in, that is where you actually get into a lot of trouble.
I think it's very interesting to be a little retrospective in a moment like this, because the company started out as a video website in the beginning, and then it quickly expanded to manufacturing smartphones, TVs, and even electric cars. As I mentioned, it positioned itself to challenge Apple and Tesla. What made it happen? I mean, how did it manage to grow in such short period of time? What kind of opportunity did it latch on to, Mr. Chen?
I think it is market cap. It is Chinese capital market. I think from the video side per se, the Le video site is not the number one. Number one is iQIYI, Youku Tudou, and Tencent's video. So, but the market cap of not that big revenue of Le video site is about almost 100 billion RMB. So that big market cap, combined with the inspiration of Jia Yueting, to be a big player, and get him into an area where the cell phone challenged Apple and everybody else. The cell phone is a very tough business. It is related to video site in a certain way, but if you're using the words of ecosystem, it's not that related. So you're putting a lot of things together, you're not number one. I think that's where the problem comes. Now
the company find it deep in crisis. Let's talk about whether a company in the early years should focus on one business mainly, or diversify as early as possible, as much as possible. I think Mr. Chen earlier made the point. He clearly thinks that you should focus on one main business. He was talking about the 120% focus on one thing. What do you think, David?
It's definitely true. I think that it takes a lot of concentration to make something very successful, and you really want to do something very successful before you would branch out and do other things. So in terms of running a business, obviously it takes a lot of capital, it takes talented people who really have knowledge, very deep knowledge in the industry, knowing the technologies, knowing management, knowing how to do the organization work, and then also knowing how to raise capital. And so all of those are very key components associated with running a good business. And then of course they have to establish the distribution, making sure that whatever products that they have a channel to do that, and also to do it successfully and profitably. I mean, if you're not running a profitable business, there's no money, and you wouldn't be able to support any other expansions that you want to have.
Well, what are the biggest risks from diversification? I mean, what would the lethal part?
Diversification too early is that number one is you do not have a very good cash flow from your main business or a few of the businesses. Number two is you do not have a lot of great management team in place. And number three is that when you are not the leader in each of the areas, you have a bigger competitor on each of the areas. They're all very, very strong. They have a lot of capital. So you find yourself suddenly you have 5 businesses, and you find yourself, you're number 3 here, number 5 here, number 10. But in today's world, only number 1, number 2 counts. There's a lot of capital there.
So that's not good. But there are other companies who have made it. What kind of lesson can we learn from those successful companies like Alibaba, like Tencent, who have done multiple business or in multiple business sectors?
I would say that if you look at Tencent or Alibaba, they have found some very successful business models, and those are business models that are not easily duplicatable. In terms of presenting contents or distributing contents on TV type of things, or doing smartphones, those are very, very competitive businesses, and you need to have very sharp focus and very thin margins to kind of run the organizations. So one, obviously, is to identify the appropriate business model, make sure that you do very well in it, and if you're not doing well enough, that you have to be flexible enough in terms of your strategy, and you want to make sure that you have an organization and a management team that can tell you how to redirect. And I think that the learning process, knowing what to change early on, and knowing how to move around when the situation actually changes and when technologies actually change, then those are some of the key assets in a company.
Yeah, if you actually see of those 3 companies, BAT in front of mine, and I've seen them grow from where, like Baidu, for the very, very long time, doing nothing but only search. Tencent for a long time doing nothing but QQ. And when you have a huge user base, you make sure that your user flow of your QQ can be leveraged into the game and the others, right? That's equal, they're related. And then for Alibaba for a long time, it is the e-commerce. And then suddenly you find all three companies getting their profit margin to be over 50%, highly profitable, a lot of cash flow. Then it's starting getting into the related business, which is really ecosystem related to their main platform, so that you can leverage your main platform to support your new businesses. So that's how they're very successful. They are actually diversified a little bit, but they diversified in a very, very little space, not making hardware, not making cars, not making cell phones.
How do you look at the transformation for China's venture capital sector for the past 3 years, from the boom for startups in 2015 to the winter per capita, some has called it, in 2016?
I'm not quite sure if you can really call this a winter in capital markets. I think it's cooling down, obviously. People are taking a very realistic look at the business models, looking at these companies and whether or not they see the value, whether or not the market is valuating those companies correctly. I think most certainly it's a very healthy kind of toning down, I think. You have less capital, and so the less healthy companies would probably go away. And it's very important for this cycle to go through so that you would actually have very competitive companies to remain in the marketplace.
All right, we're running out of time. I had to leave it there. Thank you very much to you both.
That's
Mr. Chen Hong, CEO and Chairman of the Haina Group, and David Leung, Chief Business Officer of Duke Kunshan University. So as we heard from our experts, there are many ways to set up a successful business. But one thing that all business planners need to take into account is not only the level of risk in a venture, but also the level of cash flow. Indeed, it is said that a third of all businesses fail because of a lack of cash flow, despite there being ample profits, according to the PLL account. And as Le Eco learned to its cost, companies need to pay attention to the potential risks of diversification. The fate of this company is still in the balance, and only time will tell how it fares in the future. And that's all from this edition of The Point. As always, you can follow us on Twitter or visit our Facebook page using the handle The Point with Liu Xi. And download the application called CGTN Live to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thank you for your company, and bye for now.